Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Son of Sam Chronicles. I'm RockerMike. Top left, we got Rob Rossi, Chris Jr., top right. And we have a very special guest today, Dr. Mike Caparrelli. He has written a fantastic new book called Monster Mirror, 100 Hours with David Berkowitz, also known as the Son of Sam. How you doing today, Mike?
Great to be on. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm glad you're on too. I think we're just going to go right into this. There's a lot to unpack with this book. I read a few chapters, and it's fantastic. It's different than any other Son of Sam book I've ever read.
Oh, very different.
Very different. And it touches on things that I don't think has even ever been discussed. Obviously, you spent 100 hours or a little bit more, 100 hours with David, which is more than anybody. Okay, I think even more than Maury, Terry, and Abramson combined. Really, I'd say since the time he's been incarcerated, he probably knows you best, and you know him better than anybody that's visited him. So I think you have quite a perspective, and to write a book from that perspective, I think is pretty amazing. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the book, I just want you to give a little bit of information about yourself. I know you're a retired pastor, so you have that perspective. And also, I just want to, where can we get this book? I know it's out right now.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, about 2.5 hours from New York City, an hour from Boston. My stepfather, who played a big role in my childhood, was from the Bronx. So I went back and forth to New York City a lot as a kid. And, grew up in a broken home. My biological dad was in prison, although in our family, being Italian American, it was said that he was in school. That's the euphemism that Italians use.
I love that in the book, by the way. I love that part of the book, Mike.
My father actually still to this day, here I am in my mid-40s, says, when I went to law school. And I'm like, I'm 45 now. We can get beyond this. You didn't go to law school. But So grew up in a broken home. Probably my compassion for inmates began, visiting my dad in prison. Generous, fun. We put in the back of his pickup truck, taking places, Disneyland, New York, you name it. So I knew the man, they knew the monster.
Right.
That whole stigma, the whole what sociologists call the horn effect, is the idea of putting a horn on someone's head or horns on their head, demonizing them and not able to see the humanity. I understood that at a young age. And then at 17 years old, I'm locked up in juvenile jail, my own, shenanigans. And I gave my life to Christ shortly after that time. My whole life changed from that point on. Eventually pastored a church, pastored for 16 years. The congregation was predominantly people from addiction, ex-felons, people that have come out of prison, in recovery. So that was my practical experience for 16 years, was working alongside those that were from very dysfunctional backgrounds. We used to always say at our church that we reach people from jail and we reach people from Yale. I had a higher education, bachelor's, master's degree, eventually a PhD in behavioral science. But really, I got more degrees than a thermometer, but still, I'm a street kid. That's just my background. Gave me talk, spent enough time with me. A lot of urban colloquialisms. It's just who I am.
Right.
But the education gave me some insight in dealing with human behavior. My PhD is in advanced studies in human behavior. Back when I resigned from pastoring, I took 3 jobs as an adjunct professor at a college in Massachusetts, one in New Hampshire, and then one in Rhode Island. Some of it is online, and other classes are actually in person. I teach abnormal psych, social psych, criminal psych, human growth and development, you name it. So that's my background. I love pastoring after suffering 2 heart attacks. I suffered 2 heart attacks. I had a minor heart attack, and then about maybe a year later, had the Widowmaker, which kills 83% of the people. I was punching the bag, fooling around, sparring in the gym with a friend, and just hit the ground. My jaw locked. An hour later, in the surgery room at Rhode Island Hospital, put 4 stents in my arteries. And pastoring was stressful, to say the least. It was a very stressful occupation as much as I loved it. But right now with authoring, traveling, I've been in venues in 18 states speaking on mental health in the last 1 year, from Alaska to Chicago to New York, New Jersey. I mean, I'm all over the place. I speak in prisons, speak in churches, speak in colleges, mainly on the subject of mental health. And that's really the focus of the book, is the mental health factors, as well as some of the spiritual influences behind David's crimes.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. Quite a different qualification that a lot of people that have written books in the past had. You definitely, PhD in behavioral studies and also the Christian perspective as a pastor. Where can we get this book right now, Monster Mirror?
You can go on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Book A Million, any of the major distributors, and order the paperback. Book Baby, I don't remember the exact website, but they have a hardcover. Actually, here it is right here. The Dust Jacket hardcover copy of the book, which is really well done. The foreword has been written by Michael Franzese.
Yes.
Yeah. The name is a friend of mine, maybe 15 years. Michael was priorly part of organized crime. He was an underboss in the Colombo crime family. Gave his life to Christ. He's been traveling the world. Used to speak at our church every year. He wrote the foreword, and there's also some pretty well-known doctors like Dr. Daniel Eman, Dr. Caroline Lee. These are some real popular names in Hollywood. You can go on YouTube, find lectures, TED Talks by these people that read the book, interviewed me, or at least Caroline Lee is interviewing me. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm going to be going on her show. Daniel Amen read the book, gave a blurb for it. So lots of endorsements, a lot of networking involved with this, and some big opportunities ahead with the book and press releases scheduled.
Okay. So
after reading the first couple of chapters of your book, I'm not going to buy your book unless you autograph it. That's how good it is. I want to throw it out there.
Well, we want 3 autograph books here.
We want autograph books. We're not buying anything until that happens.
So Mike, let me ask you, what was the thought process into even getting into a book, writing a book about David? Why did you pick Son of Sam as opposed to another killer?
Well, David is not the first person with his background that I've had relationship with. There were 2 others, definitely psychopathic in the present.
Yeah.
Right? Still playing games, a lot of manipulation, and didn't really go that far with the 2 of them. I wasn't really interested in writing the book. It was more prison chaplaincy. I'd worked in the prisons, going in, doing ministry, and those 2 just kind of, those relationships reached the impasse. David, I just sent him one day back in 2021, a copy of my prior book called Dr. Jesus, which is a book on mental health issues from a biblical perspective. I mailed it to him with a Christmas card. Within 2 weeks, he wrote me a letter back, and he agreed to meet. And when I met him, he simply told me, I would appreciate a guy of your dual qualifications telling my story, because you have a respect for my faith, you understand the faith, but at the same time, you have a background in mental health. So right away, I became interested. I'm teaching these classes in the college. That's where my head is living, speaking on these subjects continually. Just started meeting with David, and we decided to write the book. We narrowed down the focus, that it would be the factors behind the crimes, as well as his present day life in shotgun and his conversion experience and the impact it's had on his personality. It was really a mutual thing. I can't say that I partly initiated it because I sent the book in the Christmas card, and then he responded with a desire for me to meet him. Went, and somewhere along the way in that first session, the first conversation, back in early 2022, with a mask on my face because it was COVID, we decided it would be a great idea to tell the story.
Wow. Okay, you're like a natural fit, it seems. for this.
Yeah, it was what he was looking for. He had Christians priorly write a book, but more from, the Christian perspective, kind of puddle deep when it came to mental health issues. And then, of course, there's been a whole slew of books written on the secular mental health side, no regard for his faith.
Right.
I felt the combination of the two had made me the prime candidate to tell the story.
Okay, I'm gonna go into the introduction section here of your book. It starts off with a quote from Dostoevsky. It says, "Nothing is easier than to denounce the evildoer. Nothing is more difficult than to understand him." And then you mentioned how you took the horns off of David Berkowitz, a convicted killer. And you just mentioned the horn effect a few minutes ago. What do you mean by that? And what was the thought process with that?
Well, there's a lot of data to support this phenomenon known as it's actually cognitive distortion. It's more cognitive psychology. I said social psychology earlier. I misspoke. It's more cognitive. It's in the mind. Mm-hmm. That when we find out some character defect about someone right away, it's very difficult for us to see past that character defect. So our assessment of the individual, once we notice a particular character defect, becomes very narrow, and we don't really take into account the full humanity of who they are. Now, that's very easy to do if somebody has David's background and has done the dastardly deeds that he's committed. It's real easy to put horns on him. Problem with that is once we put that horn effect, once we come under that horn effect, really understanding what went into these crimes, our understanding becomes very shallow. So I make the argument in the book, rather than calling him a psychopath, it's pretty easy to do. He certainly he did qualify for the diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder, which is the clinical term for psychopathy. Psychopathy is not a clinical term.
Right.
It's not in the DSM. It's more of a cultural construct.
Right.
And he would definitely qualify as antisocial and psychopath. He would, no doubt, the crimes that he committed. I say rather than doing that, let's bracket psychopathy and let's focus on some of the struggles, the mental health factors that we can all relate to.
Right.
It is the deal. Every time some crime is committed, families, parents, friends, they're always saying, I would have never thought my son, my daughter. So the profile is ever expanding. I go back 70 years. There was an idea that criminals were more introverted, hermit. Then Ted Bundy shows up and he's this gregarious personality and he shatters the mold. And the mold, it keeps shattering. It keeps shattering because I believe that anybody is capable of anything, providing the right circumstances. Now that's a hard pill. It's a giant pill for us to swallow because we want to believe that I would never do that. It gives us a sense of moral superiority to call David and everybody like him, a monster. And that's the idea I'm challenging in the book, is that the factors behind these crimes, shame, isolation, abandonment trauma, head trauma,
anger,
a lot of the factors that are behind this are as human and as universal as it gets. And that's a bitter pill for many people, especially sanctimonious, self-righteous people, to swallow.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Mike, I have a question on that. Let's say you and David Berkowitz met each other before he was a murderer, right? Before he actually went off that deep end. And, I realize I'm making, I'm making this really perfect, but I know that you're saved. I know that, you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and you've led people in your faith. If David Berkowitz met you before he became a killer, would he have still become a killer if he had met you? Or someone like you? And he really...
That's a good question, actually. That's a really good question that I've actually thought about myself. I've kind of gone in that time machine in my mind back 1975, 74, whenever, before these crimes began, and, envisioned, what would have happened if I met him? How that would have went down? Maybe a broader question to ask is, could have there been any preventive factors? Could have there been anything that could have happened?
Sure.
To prevent this from happening. And it's hard to answer that. What I do know is I know that there were people I pastored for 16 years that were very close. They were at the cusp of self-sabotage, collateral destruction, homicide, suicide, right at the cusp.
Right.
They're welcomed into the church. They have an encounter with God. They assimilate into the community. They find their place. They find their purpose. And now all of a sudden, they're on the right track. They've repented from the wrong track. So I've seen that happen time and time again. I know many people that if they were diagnosed at the worst possible moment, they probably would have been classified as a psychopath. This is contrary to what a lot of people believe. This is going to fly in the face of our cancel culture. But I tend to believe that psychopathy is more of a state than it is a trait. I think it's something that if a lot of people look back at certain dark periods of their life,
yes,
they exhibit the lack of empathy, they exhibit the manipulative tendencies, they exhibit the exploiting behaviors. It just takes a real honest...
Right. Yeah, I think, I guess what I was trying to get at was, it seems like what you said is, it's hard, and it is a hard pill to swallow. Any of us can, become a David Berkowitz, right? Maybe not David Berkowitz exactly, but in our own way, become so far from who we really are due to the environment. Not necessarily what's in our hearts or in our soul or mind, really, at one certain point. Just you become a totally different person based on the environment.
And I think it's a slippery slope. Okay, you mentioned three things that he was experiencing: isolation, anger, and shame. Right. And I think that, even just one of those is enough to tip people. But if you're experiencing all three, and there's nobody that you have to talk to, and you don't have the support network with friends or even in therapy, if you don't have that, you're gonna go down, and it's very easy to do that. Now, you mentioned in the book that with the right set of circumstances, even a Catholic nun could crack you in the head with a tire iron. I think that I've always said, and I'm sure you'll agree, it's basically the same thing, is that I think anybody in the right circumstances is capable of even killing or doing something that they normally wouldn't do. Okay, and you could be angry enough. Okay. Road rage is a perfect example that people experience road rage all the time. I know, so I've been in cars with people that any other time you would never see that kind of behavior, but when they get in the car, they have road rage. And we know people die from that. It's the same thing. But let me ask you, Mike. Your first meeting with David Berkowitz was on Friday, April 1st, 2022. I know you said that, he had read your book and wanted to possibly work with you at that point. But what was it like when you first met him? I mean, what was going through your head? You're sitting with a guy that's convicted of these murders. Were you scared at all? I mean, what was going through your head?
I don't want to sound like a tough guy, but I wasn't scared.
Okay.
Maybe awkward would be a good word. You're meeting somebody for the first time in a very anomalous setting. Typically meet people for the first time behind bars. Although I've done prison ministry, so I do know what that's like. Somewhat. Most of the time, I've already met them either on the streets. I've met them and they're in prison now, or I've met them maybe in a Bible study within the prison. And then somebody with high level of notoriety. So definitely a little bit awkward. I'm not exactly sure what to say. But when you put aside the notoriety, you put aside the persona, because there's David Berkowitz, the persona, and there's David Berkowitz, the person. Most people know David Berkowitz, the persona.
Right.
Some of the persona, a good percentage of it is what's been created by media. Others are sound bites from his own words, isolated moments in time. I mean, God forbid if they took snippets of things I've said through the years, made a full assessment of who I am now based on those snippets. So his persona is one thing. The person, I said, you know what? I'm going to put aside the persona. It's the chalkboard is completely erased. I'm going to hit reset, be real intentional about this, and give this guy a chance to show me who he is, and take into account any preconceived notions I have, not allow those preconceived notions to cloud my judgment. And when I did that, I found a guy that was very relatable. I'm expecting this extraterrestrial being, and he's not. He's just this guy. He's a very relatable guy. He's like a kid I grew up with in the neighborhood. In some ways, he mirrors back to me characteristics of myself. Hence the reason why I called it Monster Mirror. I'm expecting to look into the eyes of a monster, not present David Berkowitz, but past David Berkowitz. I'm expecting to see a monster when he tells me his childhood story. Instead, I'm seeing a mirror. My mind is constantly conjuring up parallels between some experience he shares and my own experience.
Sure.
I walk away after every session, 34 sessions, and say, there's a fine line between what we call the psychopath and the general population.
Oh, definitely. That, goes back to what you were saying on all those 3 points of isolation, anger, and shame.
Let's take isolation. If I could just take 1 second. Isolation alone, which, by the way, I came up with 9 themes. I call it a recipe for violence. Each theme is an ingredient. You can't really say one ingredient makes up the eggplant palm. It's a collection of ingredients. Yeah. But let's just isolate one ingredient for a second. Let's take isolation. University of Japan has conducted countless studies on rodents. They take a group of rodents, they isolate a sample of those rodents, put them in isolation for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks of isolation, they reintroduce the isolated sample back to their community. And right away, the isolated rodents are aggressively attacking the rodents that's their tribe, that's their community. So isolation, from an adult perspective, human perspective, it increases neuropeptides, which increases blood pressure, makes us irritable, edgy, aggressive. You've heard the saying at parties, you show up at a party, some guy is there, he's argumentative, he's arguing with everybody, and what do they say at the party? They go, he doesn't get out much. We say that because intuitively we know when people don't get out much, when they're isolated too long, when we are out of touch or when we lose touch, we're out of touch.
Right.
Out of touch.
Right. It makes me think of the Horn effect again. Okay, because when David was arrested, and then as the story evolved over time, he was perceived to be a wallflower at the party. Was antisocial or awkward, but yet we know that's not really true. Okay, he did have friends, and he even had girlfriends, and however, in your book, he goes into that a little bit. He mentions how he couldn't relate with people. He could be talking to somebody, but maybe just keep it like general conversation, like about the weather, something, or, couldn't really connect with anybody. And that caused this isolation. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, there's a big difference between being with people and bonding with people.
Yes.
David Berkowitz grew up in the most populated city in the United States of America. I think we got to picture this. Yeah. The movie Taxi Driver, which was a movie that played a big influence in his crimes.
Sure.
Related to Travis Bickle because the guy is, he's a taxi driver, so he's a part of a network of other taxi drivers. He's got some friends, certainly more isolated than most people, but in the sense that he's around people all the time. David was a part of the Appalachian Mountain Club. A lot of stories about that. A lot of stories about his interactions with other youth climbing the mountains. Actually, got dropped off in Shore Dunk, not far from the prison where he is now. You can see through the window of one of the areas in the prison, the spots on the mountains and the dunks.
Yeah.
Part of baseball teams, part of the volunteer firemen club, all these different groups. But so his isolation wasn't really the result of seclusion. We can't put him in the category of Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber.
No.
Obama. His isolation is the result of secrecy, not seclusion.
Right.
So he's people. He's got a lot of sidekicks, but he's got more secrets than he has sidekicks. And you got a lot of secrets. You're not really bonded. That need for connection, social connection, even though you're with people, you're not of people. It's really never fulfilled. You still feel lonely in the crowd.
Yeah.
A lot of people out there that feel lonely in a crowd, they know exactly what I'm talking about. What I'm saying resonates with many listeners right now, that you got 100 friends, 5,000 on Facebook, but when you're in that crowd, you still feel all alone.
Well, that's the problem with today with social media. In my opinion, I think that as much as the world's gotten smaller because of social media and Facebook and whatever, you could be friends with somebody. You call it friends. Maybe it's not really. You could be friends with somebody, 6,000 miles away. Okay.
Yes.
But, do you really know them? Do you really connect with them? Do people tell the truth on social media? Most people don't. Okay. You can even have a different picture. Who knows if you really look like that? Okay. And, people put up these images and these facades, and you don't really know them. I think also it because we rely on social media so much today, I think, especially in America, I think it's taken away from the social skills that we need to get by on a day-to-day basis. And I see this with younger kids, not so much people our age, but because we grew up at a time, we were all formative years, we didn't have the internet or anything close to it. So, but with the younger people, I see that they're more, I've been to parties, for instance, with younger kids where they're just sitting in a room texting, and they're texting the guy sitting across from them or the girl sitting across from them in the same room. It sounds funny, and it in some sense it is, but at the same time, it's kind of sad because you don't have, with social media, you don't have that connection. Now, David, obviously, for some reason, obviously just not isolation, he had anger issues. He was in therapy as a kid. He was prone to violent outbursts, all kinds of issues like that obviously didn't go away as he got older. He just dealt with things in a different way.
Hey, let me intervene here 1 second. Mike, let me ask you a question. With David, David technically is Italian.
I'm sorry?
No.
David Berkowitz is technically Italian. He was born into an Italian family, and then he was adopted by these other things. So from the beginning, he probably had abandonment issue because his original family, gave him up for adoption right away.
His mother's maiden name wasn't DeFalco. That was her married name. She had an affair with a Jewish guy, so I think he's all Jewish. He had some Italian in him.
David is Hungarian by nationality, by birth.
Right.
Okay. Falco was his biological mother's previous lover's last name.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
His biological last name would have been Kleinman. They were Hungarian Jews. Which also the Berkowitzes were also Hungarian Jews. Not unusual. The liaison between the two families, a lady named Mrs. Miller, she is who hooked up the Berkowitzes with David's biological mother.
Wow.
She put some thought into where this child would be best placed.
Wow.
Hungarian Jew biological family, Hungarian Jew adopted family. I mean, I'm speculating here.
Right.
That she was, Mrs. Miller was, intentional about where David would go. She called the Berkowitz family, called Pearl up on the phone and said, there's a baby that's up for adoption. And Pearl and Nathan, they had been waiting for a while to have a baby. Drove to Brooklyn Hospital, right on the steps of Brooklyn Hospital, 4 days old. And Pearl, Berkowitz showed up, and Betty, David's biological mother, handed him over to Pearl. But definitely abandonment issue. Let me say this to you.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to at all cast a shadow on adoption. I think adoption is wonderful, but I do think we need to see adoption for what it is. There is a trauma that takes place on a very instinctual level.
Yeah.
More cognitive development. That baby is bonding with its mother for 9 months in the womb.
Yeah.
We tend to think that learning begins in the classroom. It doesn't begin in the classroom. It begins in the womb. Now you got 9 months of a connection being formed. And now that bond is disrupted. Serial killers are said to be, I think it's 7 or 8 times more likely to be adopted. A study done on this to show there's a higher prevalence among serial killers with adoption. And it does create an abandonment trauma on a very visceral level that I'm afraid most of us don't even understand. But David, from a very young age, pushed away his adopted parents, as wonderful as they were. They were great parents. They did everything they could to reach him. And they said from a young age, he was pushing them away. And he couldn't even understand why he was pushing them away.
Wow.
Yeah, there's some truth to the abandonment piece that you're saying. I mean, I don't even know. I basically agree with that statement, but I just, in my own interactions with close friends of mine that were adopted, they always, it seems like, especially if their parents were in the United States, they always end up seeking out their birth parents in some way, shape, or form. That's why now you find out a lot of people look outside the country when they go for adoption because they're worried about their adopted child abandoning them later on for their real parents who are in America. I mean, it's a pretty interesting dynamic when you think about it.
I just want to realize I don't want to stigmatize adoptees. Most adoptees don't become mass.
Oh, no, I get that.
You're not saying that. You're not saying that.
I want to put it in perspective.
Yeah, no.
Sound bit. It's one factor.
Right.
Piece it to that. It's one piece. You put that piece in the collection of other pieces.
Right.
Yeah.
Anger, childhood experiences, and now you have a ticking time bomb.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's, to your point though about the abandonment. I mean, there is something extremely unique and special about the bond between the child and the birth parent. It just doesn't go away. I've seen it in my own friends. That was really the point I was trying to make.
Yeah. We know from medical studies that when a baby's born, an infant in a room full of strangers can detect the odor of its mother.
I believe that.
Sure. Mother amongst a group of people.
Sure.
So there's a bond that's been formed for 9 months. The bond doesn't begin when the baby's born. The bond begins at conception. And everything that mother experiences, feels.
Yes.
This is a term that one lady named Annie Murphy, who's done a lot of study in this area, she calls it biological postcards, meaning that the mom's experiences with the outer world are like postcards being sent to the baby, shaping that baby for the world they're about to enter. Kind of like you get a postcard that tells you, look, if you come to Alaska, here's what you can expect. Look at the picture of Alaska on the postcard. Well, the mom's experiences with the outer environment are affecting that baby, letting that baby know the kind of world that baby's about to enter. Studies have been done on fetuses that were in the womb during 9/11. Moms that lived in the lower Manhattan area. Okay, so this is 22 years ago. Those babies now are 22 years old. Those babies that were in the womb of a mom during 9/11, it's a higher prevalence of PTSD.
Stop.
And they
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
They were born.
Because the mother, are you saying it's because the mother experienced it, so the kid experiences it?
Biological postcards.
There you go.
Stress, her cortisol levels are up.
I believe that.
Stress hormone. Baby experiences what mom experienced.
Of course.
It's called prenatal programming. You can Google that, and you'll find a lot of studies done in this area. And, David's the pregnancy of David, by the way, Betty's pregnancy of David was very tumultuous. Lots of physical altercations between her. Well, I shouldn't say lots. There were at least one or two that David knew about, but there was an ongoing stressful verbal battle. And there was at least a couple of physical altercations that David knew of between Betty and her love of David's biological father. Betty wanted to keep him. The father wanted nothing to do with the baby, created a lot of strife, and that affects the shaping of the central nervous system of the fetus known as David Berkowitz.
Wow. Okay, wow. So, Mike, I'm going to change gears here for a second, just shift out of this topic. One thing that's very, very interesting about your book is, you bring things from the psychological, modern day perspective of therapy, diagnosing what's wrong with people and things like that. And obviously that's your background and your PhD background. But you also talk about demonic possession, and you talk about how certain, how basically the modern day system doesn't allow for that at all. And also how some of these things that were wrong with David, or could be wrong with anybody, can lead to demonic possession, open the door to that. Now, my question to you is, do you think David was possessed? And does he think he was possessed? And just kind of explain a little bit about demonic possession.
Well, let me begin by saying 2/3 of the world believes in demonic activity. America, we're very rational, our country. We're so left-brained that our bodies tilt to the left when we walk down sidewalks. It's just we're very left-brained people, so it's hard for us to understand this whole supernatural perspective that Africans, people in Asia, all through Europe, the Caribbean, they're very stupid. So, you can call it horse and buggy, but here's the deal. In America, we've got more child trafficking. We've got more mental health issues. So our purely rational approach doesn't seem to be doing the trick when we're leading the way with serial killings. There are 13 mass shootings a week in the United States of America. You will find those statistics in other countries.
No.
So you can criticize other countries and we can, feel superior in our rational approach. But the facts are the results. The proof is in the eating of the pudding, and the pudding doesn't taste so good here. We've got all sorts of problems sociologically, culturally. So with all that said, I believe in natural phenomenon, understanding the psyche, understanding the mind, mental health, and I believe that beyond this, that there is a supernatural reality. I'm a little reluctant in talking about it because right away it's perceived as spooky, superstitious. But here's the facts, and everyone has experienced this at one time or another. There are moments when you will behave in such a way, maybe you lose your temper. You back up from the situation, and this is what you usually say when you apologize. You say, I don't know what got into me. I'm sorry I did that. I'm sorry. I don't know what possessed me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What are you suggesting when you say that?
Oh, no, I know. That something took over your body and you didn't have any control.
It was like, something whipped up. I was irritated and something came along and whipped up that irritation into rage. How'd that happen? Now, am I saying that demonic activity, which David does believe he was demonized, that's the word he likes to use.
Right.
The word possession is kind of, with the movie The Exorcist, it's kind of taken on certain connotations.
Yeah.
He likes to say demonize. Being demonized doesn't mean there's no human responsibility. The analogy I give in the book is alcohol. Right. You have too many drinks. You're under the influence of some mind-altering substance, and now you're doing things and saying things that you ordinarily wouldn't do. Do we hold a person responsible? We do, because they made the choice. They opened the door for the alcohol or for the substance to a point of intoxication, and whatever they do under that state of intoxication, they should be held liable because they opened the door. So is David responsible? Yes, he's responsible.
Sure.
But there have also been, we like to polarize. It's like one or the other. And most of the time, it's not one or the other. Most of the time, the truth is a combination of both. He was responsible. There were mental health factors involved. There was natural phenomenon in synergy with, from my perspective, spiritual influences, and I do believe in a demonic reality that played a role in this understanding humans.
Wow. That's pretty profound right there.
To that point, and this is what I really like about the book. I think I talked to you once or twice before today, so I don't really know you that well. But I feel like I got to know you a little bit in the first couple of chapters in the book. And one thing that I've kind of subscribed to since the pandemic is that, you know, there's Eastern and there's Western medicine, right? In terms of overall health, right? You know, yes, you want to listen to your doctor in America, but there are also remedies that date back, you know, 1,000 years that work for certain things as well to get you a little bit more healthy. What I'm getting from the book, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like you've kind of found a way to take your academic approach and your spiritual approach to life and marry them in your, I guess, interactions with David and others. And I think that that's awesome because I don't think the world really views psychological, you know, the human psyche in that way. I don't know. It makes me happy. I mean, it's nice to see.
Well, it's a refreshing new outlook.
Right. I like the outlook, but I think it makes a lot of sense as well. I mean, it's just, you can. A certain environment can allow you or give demons an opportunity to find their way in, right?
Well,
you know,
if we accept the reality of a devil and we acquiesce to the idea of demons,
right,
and we understand that a devil or demons is predatory in nature.
Sure.
Any predator, the modus operandi is to prey upon the weak.
Yep.
So if someone is weak, if there's vulnerabilities, what we call in the clinical world risk factors, if there are a number of risk factors, whether it's fatherlessness or sexual abuse or abandonment trauma, whatever it is, you know, predator is going to sniff that out quickly. I mean, if you talk to child predators, they'll tell you. I mean, the FBI is tons of data to prove that predators look for very amicable people that are going to go along to get along, people that are just maybe low self-worth. They're not going to take a strong stance. I mean, FBI has conducted interviews with, for instance, serial rapists, and they've pretty much provided the same set of circumstances on how they pick their quality. They'll show up in a mall parking lot. They'll approach a lady. This is a very common scenario that you'll hear. And they'll offer the young lady a piece of gum, and she'll say no. They'll offer it a second time. If she says, I said, I don't want the gum, he leaves. If she takes that gum the second time, she goes along to get along. She has a certain level of amicability in her personality, might come from low self-worth, might come from not having a mom or dad, whatever it is. And now that is an indication to that predator, she's easy prey. She's someone who will cooperate. So all that to say, devil, demons, these are predatory entities, and they're going to sniff out vulnerability. David has a lot of risk factors that put him. Now, let me say this. I know someone's going to say, well, David did, deny the devil, and he did claim that the devil was nothing more than a defense mechanism to minimize his own culpability. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of backdrop to that.
Yes.
They just pick up at Attica, and, they're making all sorts of dog noises because of what he said about the dog. Yeah. There's a lot of pressure from various places, which I describe in the book, that it made it easy for David to recant his story about the devil, which the New York Times headlines read in the 1970s, I believe 1979. It said Berkowitz recants his devil tale. And there was a lot of pressure there. Now, do I think that David, listen, here's the question I beg in the book. Did the devil use David?
Right.
Or did David use the devil?
Right.
And my answer to that is both. I do believe David used the devil to feel less culpable.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean the devil didn't also use David.
Right. Well,
in fact, you look at any toxic relationship, a pimp and a prostitute.
Yeah.
The pimp is using the prostitute. But make no mistake about it, the prostitute is also
Using
the pimp.
right.
Yeah.
All toxic relationships, it's two ticks and no dog. They're sucking the life out of each other. So
Yeah.
Do you take this?
David, and David is using Satan.
Do you take the same approach with everyone that is in a similar situation as David? I mean, not everyone's going to be David Berkowitz, the son of Sam. Some may have committed a million petty crimes that landed him in jail for a significant amount of time, and maybe you've talked to that type as well. I'm sure you have. But do you approach them all the same way, or did this kind of marriage between what you've learned and through your studies and some of the stuff you kind of understand on the supernatural side due to your faith?
I approach any study from a certain worldview.
Okay.
I mean, I know there's going to be criticism of all these Christians coming from that worldview, but there's not a scientist on the planet that does not approach the table of research with a set of biases
Okay.
and a particular worldview.
That's
My
fair.
worldview is a Christian Judeo worldview.
Right.
I'm
Beautiful.
not ashamed of that. I believe.
Where should you be, by the way?
Yeah, I believe in my faith. I believe the Bible's the greatest psychology book ever written. I don't read it as much as it reads me. It's a mirror into the soul. So I see things through that lens of the scriptures. And I teach at a Christian college. I also teach at a secular college, so I got to be careful with references to the Bible in those classes. But in the Christian college, North Point in Massachusetts, it's an undergraduate school. I'm able to reference often the scriptures because there's a lot about human behavior. And listen, I'm not alone. You got in my opinion, one of the most famous psychologists on the planet right now, Dr. Jordan Peterson, who I have tremendous respect for. He's continually citing the Bible, the narrative of the scripture to teach us something about human behavior. Something very special about that book, not just what it reveals about God, but what it reveals about mankind.
Right. Okay. All right. Let me, we're going to wind down this first part of the interview. We'll be back with the second part real soon. My final question today, and I got to put you on the spot a little bit here, Mike. All right. Yeah. Many people are going to say that, or they believe that David uses people and manipulates them for attention or whatever reasons he might have. Okay. Many people believe that his Christian conversion is not true. It's a bunch of bullshit. Okay. And, they think, he's fake. Okay. And after spending over 100 hours with him, how would you answer to these skeptical people? I mean, do you believe, number one, his conversion to Christianity is real, or what? What would you say to people that might go down this reasoning?
I think my first question would be, how many hours did you spend with David Berkowitz?
Okay.
That's the first question.
Yeah.
I went into this with the benchmark of 100 hours because I knew it takes time to get to know a person. When you read the book, you're going to find out that it wasn't all smooth. It wasn't like David just said what he said and I accepted it. A lot of challenges. In fact, I don't want to give away, the end of the book, but I challenged him on some topics.
Oh yeah, in what I read, you did. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, well, you've read the first few chapters, but when you get into the later chapters of the book, I use the illustration all the time. I tell my wife this, when you do construction, you have to call it dig safe. And dig safe lets you know.
Yeah.
God forbid you should hit a pipe, something dangerous.
Yeah.
I say to my wife all the time, I didn't call dig safe with this one. I now realize what I would dig up. I just didn't realize it. I didn't go into this journey with him trying to figure out whether he's part of a cult or not, or whether he did the killings alone or not. Like, I didn't even know of Maury Terry. I knew very little of him. I'd never read Ultimate Evil. I had to read it myself somewhere. I think I read maybe 5 pages of it. No disrespect to Mr. Terry or the book, I'm just saying that wasn't my agenda. My agenda was what's behind these crimes, you personally, your childhood development. That was my agenda. But I got a lot more than I bargained for, a lot more surface than I was even looking to find. Many of the findings were serendipitous. They weren't what I planned to discover. And what I did discover throughout it all is that David Berkowitz is sincere. And has he lied? Listen, better question if you lied. University of Massachusetts conducted a study that 60% of Americans can't go 10 minutes without lying, at least once, within 10 minutes. Anonymous surveys. University of Massachusetts survey is not alone in that. There's plenty of data to show we lie as people. We lie because we're afraid. We lie because our reputation's at stake. We lie because we're cornered in.
Right.
So I don't go on this moral high horse to focus on David Berkowitz's lies. I think unfortunately most people have a PhD in other people's issues, but they're in kindergarten when it comes to their own issues.
Wow.
And that to me is a hypocrisy that, look, if I see David lie, I don't want to fall into this horn effect. I just simply realize he's a man. I call him out on it.
Right.
And we discuss it. And in the process of discussing it, the truth begins to surface. Sure. So, he himself will tell you, yes.
In your time with him, and you say he's sincere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you feel he's sincere regarding his Christianity?
Oh, 100%. 100%. David, the investment he makes. Listen, it's very hard to keep up with Assad for 35 years. People say jailhouse conversions. Most jailhouse conversions, 6 months, a year, few months before the parole hearing, connive those on the parole committee. We're talking about a man for 35 years that has been practicing his faith, discipling guys in the prison, twice a week Bible studies, very consistent about his faith. Is he perfect? Who is perfect? Nobody.
No.
In fact, I think the thing that made me believe him, ironically, it wasn't his flares, it was his flaws. It was when he was transparent about his flaws, seeing him navigate through those flaws, that helped me believe in him. A gemologist looks at two stones. If the stone is too perfect, it's not a diamond. It's a cubicirconium. If it's a real diamond, it has cracks. It has flaws. The gemologist says that's a real diamond because there's flaws. That over there is too perfect. It's too polished. It's not real. It's a cubicirconium. What made me believe David's conversion is real is I saw the flaws. I saw the cracks. He was transparent about them. He talked them through. That's what made me a believer. Ironically, it's not perfection, but imperfections.
So, I'm a researcher at the end of the day. I'm not a podcast host like Mike. Mike also has some researching ability in him as well. I don't want to take that away from him. But what I've kind of taken from David Berkowitz's interactions with other, I guess you could call them, mental health professionals or writers or journalists or whomever, is there is a tinge of he really cares what people think about him and how he's being portrayed in the media, almost in a I don't want to say narcissistic way because I'm probably using the term wrong, and because you probably know the term way better than I, you can just give me a tongue lashing like you just did about the other stuff. What was the last time you said a lie? You know what I'm saying? So I get that tinge just from reading his own correspondence with other people. Like Abrahamson, for example. The reason why I knew the Abrahamson stuff was mainly BS was because, number one, he probably found some time to learn about Freud in prison, or at least read one of Abrahamson's previous books or studies. But second, in a correspondence that was, I guess, included in the correspondence between him and Dr. Abrahamson was a correspondence with his father, Nat, basically saying, Dad, this guy's going to write a much better book about me. I really need you to talk to him. And I'm like, I was in the middle of an argument about something totally unrelated about Abrahamson's book and how it doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of David's story when it comes to the occult and other things. Nonetheless, that stuck with me. It's like, he's just looking for someone to portray him a little bit differently in the media. He doesn't want to be the demon doll guy. He wants to be this other guy who exhibits some of the things you just talked about, which, made a lot of sense to me. The isolation, the shame, etc. A lot of those elements are in what he was talking about with Abrahamson, but it was more in relation to how Abrahamson, I guess, practiced his, mental health studies and his belief in how people react in certain situations.
I think just jump in here for a second, Chris. I think what you're trying to say is did David tell Abramson what he wanted to hear?
Well, no, I know that. What I'm saying is, how do you, I guess the long-winded way to my question is, how do we know, Mike, that after 100 hours, he finally figured out a way to tell you exactly what you wanted to hear? We don't know that, right?
No, nobody, you can't.
You can't answer that.
Well, you look at 100% certainty that everything I write about what said and did is fact.
But how much of the younger manipulative David is there? Because that guy does exist. Is it a lot? Do you think he's just a much more mature person now? I mean, I don't know.
I've seen David come full circle many times where if he says something that he feels like he's not being completely sincere, his conscience kicks in.
Okay.
Better than most people I know. And he'll come back a day later, maybe 10 minutes later. It all depends. You say, let me clarify this. Or let me get to the heart of this. I was maybe deflecting a little bit, or I was maybe not telling you all that I should tell you. Like any one of us. I mean, I think that David Berkowitz cares so much what people think. We all do. You put yourself in his shoes.
Yeah.
Your name is in every document, a lot of documentaries, books, movies. You have a certain stigma surrounding your name. Let's see how much you care about what people think.
I guess you're right.
Say he's narcissistic. People that say they don't care what people think, they're lying. In fact,
right.
When you tell me you don't care what people think, it's a Freudian slip that you do care because you know that I know that you don't care.
No, I know. I'm the worst at that. I don't care what they think. Meanwhile, like
people go on social media in front of 5,000 people and put on social media in front of 5,000 people.
Yeah.
They put. I don't care what people think. Really, you care that 5,000 know that you don't care.
Right.
You inadvertently admitted that you care. Listen, I'm born again. I wasn't born last night. I may be a Christian. My Christianity is not a naivety. I'm from the streets. I'm educated in human behavior. Spend enough time with someone, you see the consistencies, the inconsistencies. Facts don't line up. You call someone on it, and probably the best indication of a man's character. And you only see this after spending a lot of time with them, not their actions.
Yeah.
People can fake actions. Reaction. How someone reacts.
Yep.
Reaction is action in real time. It's action under pressure. Action when provoked. Action under stress. Reactions is a better litmus test than actions. Shakespeare said it, all the world is a stage. It's men are thespians for players. We put on a show. Actions, people say actions tell us about someone's character. People act all the time. They pretend.
And that goes back to the social media thing. People act on that. Yeah.
So guys, let's wrap up this part one right now, and I think it'll be a good time to wrap it up. And we're going to see you with part two in 2 weeks. With we continue the interview with
Dr. Mike
Mirror, right?
Monster Mirror.
Can you show the book one more time? Because that cover looks beautiful. And we'll come back with part two of this great interview with Mike, Chris Jr. and RockerMike. All right, guys. And we'll see you in 2 weeks, and have a good one, guys.
Take care.